Hey everybody, this is Nick, and you're watching IGTV. Okay, so this is attempt 2 at the week-long vlog challenge that was challenged to me by Hans. That was probably 2 weeks ago now, and I was a little overzealous and tried to jump into it right away. And I think I did, if I recall. I just deleted all of it, but I think I did, if I recall, but I only did, there were like 3 days where I only vlogged for like 20 seconds. I did like, hey, this is what's going on, and I'll try to bring you with, and then just got too busy. So, it's a Saturday. It's Saturday, May 7th? 8th? It's a Saturday in May. I'll get back to you on that. It's probably on the screen right now, and I'm like, figure it out, you dumbass. But yeah, it's kind of mid-afternoon, and I just went shopping. Got some shopping bags chilling down there, and I'm gonna go lift in a little bit. Also, if I'm short on breath, which I'm kind of feeling already, I took a. I wish we would have been vlogging and had the cameras out for this. Adam and I went fishing yesterday. No, sorry, 2 days ago, and I slipped on a rock and fell over many more rocks and then into the river. So I like tumbled down a rock embankment about 8 feet into the river and took a pretty nasty shot to my ribs, and I have a pretty nastily bruised rib. I don't think it's cracked. It's making breathing not so difficult, and I'm not too excited about lifting with it, but I need to keep on some sort of regimen, not be lazy, so I'm gonna do a light day. And then we're gonna make some chili in this here crock pot. And I think that's going to be kind of a fun thing to vlog, and I'll show you how I make chili. Chili is one of those things that everyone kind of has their own interpretation of, but I figure we'll drink a few beers, make some chili, and that'll be exciting. A little bit of a, like, my drunk friend's kitchen, except no friend, and I don't intend on getting drunk, but I'll have a couple beers. You know, we'll have a good time. Add a little beer to the chili. It's about 9 o'clock, and I got some food in me, drank some pre-workout, and I'm just getting ready to scoot on off to the gym here. So the gym was miserable. Don't ever do shoulders or anything that involves upward pushing with bruised ribs. That really, really hurt. I was like on the edge of crying by the end of it. Like, I'm a grown-ass man, and I am not afraid to admit that that was like enough pain that I was just not okay. So, but now as promised, we're gonna make some chili. And it's about midnight, which means I'm going to be kind of late editing this evening, but that's okay. I'm pretty awake. I had some pre-workout. I'm kind of raging. So we're going to crack open some beers, and we're going to get some chili in the crock pot, and I'm going to show you how I do that. By no means is it the definitive greatest way to make chili. I'm a decent cook, but I'm not like amazing, but I'll show you how I do it. If you have any like pointers, tips, that's good stuff to put down in the comments, and you know, have some fun. Okay, and now it's chili time. We're gonna go for a speed run of this, because the faster I do this, the less of a pain this will be to edit. Throw it out there right away that I forgot to buy beans. So there will be no beans in my chili. I think I'll probably go get those in the morning and add them into the final product, power cook them on the stove, and then just mix them in. To kind of show you how I throw it together. Again, this is by no means the end all be all of anything, but this is how I do it. So, first thing, I've got about 3.5 pounds of ground beef here. I usually throw the ground beef on the bottom, so that through those first few hours of cooking, you're sure this is the thing that gets the most thoroughly cooked. I put a ton of meat in mine. If it hasn't already been clear on the channel, I'm a sort of an endurance athlete, I guess you could say. I feel like that's kind of being official and over the top, but I run mud races, triathlons, obstacle courses. Because of that, I consume a lot of food in a day. Probably about, at this point in my training, about 2 to 2.5 times as much as the average person. When I get closer to races, more like 3 to 4 times as much. And a lot of protein as part of that. So hence why I already have this about half full with just meat alone. Next, I'm going to throw in some of the mushrooms. I have 2 containers of mushrooms. I really like mushrooms. Some people aren't a fan of the texture or whatever else. I think they're like the most delicious thing ever. You want to make sure those are rinsed off because being funguses, they're basically, ooh, that's loud. They're basically grown in crap. So that might be part of why people don't like mushrooms in retrospect. It's because they're essentially grown in crap. But I can see past the crap and see that the parasites that grow on the crap are quite delicious. I typically cut these at like 3/4 of an inch thick. That's a little wide for a mushroom, but when they cook this long, they cook down quite a bit. And if you really wanted to put a lot of attention to your chili to keep them more crisp and keep them from cooking down, you could throw them in a couple hours from it being done. They don't need quite as much cook time. But that involves waking up for me. And I already have to wake up for my beans apparently. Too many things to do when I'm not a morning person. Okay, so that's done. The next thing I'm going to throw in there, because I find this pretty important to get to the bottom to give it a base and keep everything working around it, would be the tomato paste and actual tomato chunks. So we're going to start by dicing up the tomato chunks. Why I use tomato paste versus a tomato puree or chopped tomato or whatever from the store, I honestly don't know. I found myself pondering that for the first time today. I just kind of always have used tomato paste, and maybe I'm old and stuck in my ways at 25. But I don't know. It's always worked for me. I think it's probably because it starts a little thicker. So when it cooks down, it ends up being fairly thin anyway, and that's why you need the chopped tomatoes for a little more roughage to it. And I feel like if you started with a puree or something that's already thinner, it would just basically be water by the time you got through the 12-hour cook. But maybe the paste is anyway. So like I say, I don't really have a good answer for you on that, but I can spitball. And you'll notice I'm rinsing everything as I'm going. That's just kind of, good practice. You should do that. If you're not doing that, shame on you. And these I basically just cut into eighths. So I cut them in half and then just do a little 4-way cut once it's there. And then just take it and chuck it in. One of the things I like about chili is it's such a low maintenance thing to make. You don't really have to focus on order or anything like that. It's really like making a stew or a soup. You can just kind of throw everything in and let the flavors mingle and do their thing. And as long as you chose pretty decent ingredients and a good ratio of them, it'll come out pretty okay. I learned most everything I know about cooking from my dad. And he's grew up from the very German philosophy, I guess, of sniffing, taste testing, kind of trusting your gut and making impromptu decisions as you go. Yeah, that side's still good. And that just kind of carried over to me. Well, I never really use recipes. Even when I do use one, I usually use it as sort of an inspiration for what I'm pulling together and kind of take the essence of it. And I can't think of a single time I've ever actually followed a recipe to the letter. Tomato paste rolling. And this, there's really no wrong way to do for those of you that really struggle in the am I doing this right department. When it comes to putting tomato paste in, you open it and you spoon it out and see what happens. So, if you're one of those people that's been known to burn water, even you can add tomato paste to chili, I promise. So, we're just going to take a spoon and just sludge that in there. So, the trick I was going to show you, you take each one of these and fill them just a little ways up with water and put your hand on the top and give it a little shake. You'll get just a little more out of there. And this will get just enough water in your chili to keep it from drying out early in that cook process, and to keep that meat on the bottom from burning on. And as it gets further into cooking, it won't be as much of an issue. The fat will start to cook out. I usually get about 85-15, and that's because I try to stay a little leaner with my lifting and dietary regimens. With the chili, you could really even go 80-20. I'm already getting pretty close to the top, and I'm pretty aware of how big this one is, and I will stuff it right up to the point everything's touching the lid when I make a chili, because it'll cook down to only being about 2/3 full. Okay, now my next step is the jalapenos. Here I have 5 pretty plump jalapenos. I usually use jalapeno in chili, and I just cut them into little sections like you'd have, like you'd have in any other jalapeno dish. And I keep the seeds in. That's where you get a little more of the kick, and I let those intersperse. And then just leave the top. I use jalapenos in mine. I'm not sure. I know when Hans makes chili, I think he uses serranos. I cooked with jalapenos for a long time, so I have a pretty good idea of what ratio I can get between the tomato and jalapeno that keeps it in check and pretty reasonable. I haven't used serranos for habaneros in cooking specifically that much, so I'm not really sure of that. So if Hans wants to throw a comment or a video response in one of his future vlogs about whether he uses serranos or not, I seem to recall him using them, because I know his chili always ends up quite spicy. Which I do. I love Hans's chili. He makes some great chili. Maybe he could do a return chili vlog. I'm not sure I'm challenging him to that. I think I'm saving my response challenge till the end, and I'm going to come up with something real good. But so it's not an official challenge, Hans. But if you want to make a chili video and how you make your chili, I think his methods are much sophisticated than mine. Mine's kind of throw a bunch of crap in a pan and make it happen. Oh. Look at that. All those chilies in there. Not chilies, jalapenos. Man, I can't keep up with myself. Okay, next, whole onion. Usually for a crock pot or so, a whole onion does it for me. Sometimes I'll do an onion and a half or 2. I really like onions, but it's one of those things that I don't always want to overdo. I would hope most of you know how to do this, but if you don't, cut the top and the bottom off your onion. You don't want that bit. That doesn't work very well. And you cut into it just a little and peel this skinny layer off the top, like that. And once you've done that, kind of same thing I was doing with the tomatoes, except you're just going to go a little further, do it in half. Then I usually go into quarters from there, because that'll stay together pretty well and allow you to do one more cut down the middle, like that. You could cut these a little further and then continue to go in half with each section, kind of like so. I usually don't. I usually leave them in pretty big chunks. That'll end with you having decent sized chunks of onion in your final product, but it kind of comes down to personal preference. Next thing's going to go in there, some chopped garlic, and I'm going to throw a good chunk of it in there. I also like garlic a lot. Can you tell the German roots here? Lots of onions, lots of garlic. Yeah, tons of meat. Growing up, if you asked what was for dinner, if someone responded broccoli, you'd go, yeah, that's what's for the side, but what's for dinner? Come home and it'd go, well, steaks for dinner, or pork chops are for dinner, or whatever else. So, and that's just how I grew up. All I'm going to do now, you've already seen me go through this. I'm going to cut up the rest of my mushrooms in here and throw them on the top. The few I use in chili almost extensively, or almost exclusively, obviously chili powder. I'll throw a good chunk of that in there. Just something called a soul seasoning. I've been really big into this lately, and really all it is salt, sugar, paprika, turmeric, cumin, black pepper. The other thing I put a lot, or I supplement that in, there's cumin in that already, but I particularly like cumin, especially in chilies, so I usually give it a little extra push of cumin. And then on top of that, I throw some basil and some oregano. You'll notice I'm sniffing everything before I do it. That kind of goes back to the way I learned how to cook, as I was talking about before. I learned cooking without recipes and more. Smell what's there, smell how this is, and it's kind of almost olfactory math, you could call it. And it makes sense in the sense that smell is the closest to taste. So eventually, then as it gets closer, I'll taste and throw a few more of one or the other or something else in. But that's kind of what I do. All right, and here is the final product ready to start up. And I'm just going to go ahead and get us onto that 10-hour cook. Sorry, I lied about 12 hours this whole way through. 10 hours. So we'll be done at about 11 in the morning, just in time for lunch. And all I did here was I stirred those top few layers, so everything above the meat, like I mentioned before, I just stirred up and let the flavors start to mingle. So I'm going to clean up and start editing. This was day 1 of the week-long vlog challenge, and I'm excited to see what day 2 brings us. Bye, everybody.